It's the second time Jacqueline Johnson cried next to her son Kendrick's grave. The first time he was being lowered into the ground. This time he's being pulled out of it.
Did you ever expect you'd have to exhume his body?
No, I didn't expect to have to bury his body.
In June, Kendrick's body was sent to Florida. The Johnsons hired Dr. Bill Anderson to conduct an independent second autopsy. In that autopsy, Anderson told the Johnsons he'd found evidence that Kendrick died as the result of a blow to the neck and not accidental asphyxia, after slipping into a rolled gym mat at school, as investigators in Georgia had said. But what Dr. Anderson did not find shocked them.
When we got the body for the second autopsy, that organs, the heart, lungs, liver, etc., were not with the body.
The brain?
The brain, they were all absent.
Every organ from the top of Kendrick's head to his pelvis gone, and his family had no idea.
We have been let down again. And when we buried Kendrick, we thought we was burying Kendrick, not half of Kendrick.
I'm not sure at this point who did not return the organs to the body, but I know when we got the body, the organs were not there.
So CNN contacted the two entities that had custody of Kendrick's body and access to his organs: the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which conducted the first autopsy in January, and Harrington Funeral Home, which the Johnsons chose to embalm and prepare Kendrick's body for burial days later. A spokeswoman for the state tells CNN after its autopsy, the organs were placed in Johnson's body, the body was closed, then the body was released to the funeral home. State investigators say it's their normal practice, but what happened after his body arrived at the funeral home was anything but normal.
What was in the place of the organs?
Newspaper.
Newspaper.
Dr. Anderson showed me the pictures of Kendrick's body he'd taken during the second autopsy.
It's a Black Friday ad, JCPenney ad.
Yes.
Stuffing that newspaper in like he was a garbage can inside his body. It's unbelievable.
I'd imagine that that's a different kind of pain.
Yep.
Why do you think that there would be newspaper stuffed in your child?
I never heard of that before. Never.
Neither had the founder of a National Embalming Academy contacted by CNN, who said it's not consistent with the standards of care in the industry. Nor had the president of the National Association of Medical Examiners, who told CNN he's never heard of this practice.
Why would the funeral home discard his organs and stuff them with newspaper?
The question is, why did he tell us?
So what exactly did the Harrington Funeral Home do with Kendrick's organs? And why was he stuffed with old newspaper? We went to their office to find out, but their response to us? No comment. However, in a letter to the Johnsons' attorney, Harrington Funeral Home owner Antonio Harrington denies he received Kendrick's organs. He writes in part, his internal organs were destroyed through natural process and henceforth were discarded before the body was sent back to Valdosta. It's another disappointing answer for parents determined to know what happened to their son before and now after his death. And they admit they're struggling.
Unbearable, just about. Only thing that wakes you up in the morning is just to keep pushing.
Victor Blackwell joins us now. This is unbelievable. Newspaper inside this young man's body. I understand there's an investigation into where Kendrick Johnson's organs went and why. What do we know about it?
Well, Anderson, we contacted the Georgia Secretary of State's office because they issued licenses to funeral homes. We wanted to check on the history of Harrington Funeral Home. And when we told them why we were calling, they decided that they too wanted to know where are Kendrick Johnson's organs, and they wanted to know more about this process, this practice of stuffing bodies with newspaper, something that they'd never heard of either.
How was the family's autopsy doctor able to determine the cause of death then?
Yeah, I asked him, if the organs aren't there, how can you determine how Kendrick died? Well, he says that Essentially, blunt force trauma was not in the organs, it was in the right side jaw, which was actually noted as bruised during the paramedics' report on the day he was found. He dissected the jaw, which had not been dissected in the first autopsy, found bleeding under the skin. He dissected the left side as well, did not find the bleeding, and he concluded that that bruising indicated, also with the bleeding, that there was blunt force trauma, that Kendrick took that blow to the neck.
You know, Victor, one thing I hadn't noticed, and actually a viewer who works in gyms noticed and tweeted me about this the other day, was that it looks like all the mats are rolled really tightly, except for the one that Kendrick was found in. That seems to have had a large opening.
School surveillance video captures Kendrick Johnson at lunch for what would have been his last meal on the day of his disappearance. Less than 24 hours later, his lifeless body would be found in a rolled-up gym mat, leaving lots of unanswered questions. And while more than 100 students cooperated with investigators, only 2, according to the case file, refused to talk to police. The 2 were former Lowndes High School wrestler and now 18-year-old Brandon Bell and his younger brother, a classmate of KJ's. According to a 500-plus page case file, their father is FBI agent Rick Bell, who referred investigators to his son's attorney, and he advised them not to talk to police. Those interviews may have been relevant as students told investigators Johnson and the younger Bell boy, both varsity football players, had a fight on a school bus on the way to a game the year before, suggesting a simmering feud. Still, police reached out to Agent Bell a second time about talking to his sons. His attorney stated after consulting with the father of Brandon Bell and his brother, he had advised them not to make a statement, and therefore the pair would not be meeting with investigators. Meanwhile, a closer look at the attendance records of the younger Bell boy on the day of KJ's disappearance shows he was not tardy or absent. As for the older brother, Brandon Bell, student records show that he and other wrestling team members were excused from 3rd and 4th block classes in order to attend a wrestling tournament 2 hours away in Macon, Georgia. And while it's unclear when exactly the team left campus, the court-ordered release of surveillance video shows Brandon numerous times the day KJ went missing. Here, footage shows that after at least 2 class periods have elapsed, Bell is crisscrossing the hallway in front of the old gym, in the vicinity where Kendrick Johnson's body would be found the following morning. As far as the video here of KJ at lunch, we have confirmed that at least one wrestling team member who was going to that tournament is in the lunch line just ahead of KJ.
It's the only video shot inside the Lowndes High School gym the day 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson was found dead, and with his parents' approval, we're showing it for the first time. Lowndes County, Georgia investigators say Kendrick's death was a tragic accident, that he climbed onto these rolled gym mats to reach for this shoe at the center of one mat, slipped, got stuck upside down, and died. County officials say the blood in this photo spilled after Kendrick's heart had stopped pumping hours after he had died. But Kendrick's parents say the photo and the video show something else.
There's enough evidence to show that Kendrick was murdered.
CNN has exclusively obtained the 15-minute video in nearly 700 photos of the scene taken by Lowndes County investigators. And for the first time, Kendrick's parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, are ready to look at them, including these pictures of orange and black gym shoes investigators found just yards from Kendrick's body.
Did these shoes belong to Kendrick?
No.
When you look at these shoes that were at the scene, what stands out to you?
The blood on the shoe.
But investigators say tests show the stains are something other than blood, so the shoes were not collected as potential evidence.
I don't understand why you didn't.
CNN took the photos to independent private investigator and former FBI Special Agent Harold Kopis.
If you were on this scene, would this have been something you would have left?
No. Bag and tag.
There's no indication investigators ever even looked for the owner of the shoes or this hooded sweatshirt found a few feet from Kendrick's body.
And if you look real close, there's something on this particular cuff. And then the question is, was it blood? Did you test it?
According to the crime lab report, no.
They know something happened in that gym, and they don't want it to come out.
For the Johnsons, there's no stronger indicator than this photo. It's of what appears to be blood dripping down a wall. Here's what Lowndes County Lieutenant Stride Jones told CNN about that wall in May.
And we tested it, and it was blood. Now, we did DNA testing, and it was not the blood of Kendrick Johnson.
If it wasn't Kendrick blood, who blood was it?
Did you ever find out who it was or any involved?
No, as of now, we haven't, no. But it doesn't appear to be related to our crime in any way.
What do you think about the decision not to test it further?
You can't explain it. If you're running the crime scene, then you're going to say that's potential evidence. Obviously, we're going to check this out and find out who does it belong to.
This is an athletic gym. I mean, obviously, this is where they conduct various athletic classes and instructions at.
A kid couldn't have scraped their knee or arm or something and got that much blood on the wall.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 impacts.
The opinion of our crime scene personnel, after looking at it closely, the blood appeared as it had been there for an extended period of time. It didn't appear to be very fresh.
School gym. There is no way that they would allow whoever was supposed to clean this gym to leave that blood on that wall.
And there's the question, why was there no blood where they expected to see lots of blood? Remember the photo of that shoe investigators say was inches below Kendrick's head? Look at it again.
If he was inside the mat, reaching for that shoe, inside this tube, reaching for the shoe, and the shoe is beneath him, why isn't that shoe covered with blood?
And what do you think about that shoe not being covered with blood? Do you?
It was placed there.
Hey, Sheriff Prime. Hi. Victor Blackwell, CNN.
Chris Prime.
The Sheriff's Department has denied a cover-up, but we took the Johnsons' concerns to Lowndes County Sheriff Chris Prime.
Got some questions about the Kendrick Johnson case.
I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Why not, sir?
Because our case is closed.
The family has some concerns about why some things were not taken into evidence. There was blood on the wall.
I'm not going to discuss the case with you.
And why is that?
Because I don't want to.
Then, less than a minute after he'd invited us in,
What did you not understand that I said? I'm through talking to you.
he ushered us out.
Thank you, Sheriff Prime.
I don't believe this was an accident. I think this young man met with foul play.
The Justice Department is reviewing the pictures and the video to decide if it'll launch a federal investigation into Kendrick's death. But for Kendrick's father, the evidence is clear.
Someone murdered him. They should be in jail. They are covering it up. They should be in jail.
There it is, from the day Kendrick Johnson died 14 months ago this week. Walking the halls between classes, going to the cafeteria, making his way through the gym he never left. Kendrick was found dead, rolled up in a mat. And while investigators say he accidentally suffocated in that mat, his family believes he was murdered and it was all covered up. Victor Blackwell's been all over this story, speaking with everyone involved. He's got the latest. Joseph Scott Morgan, our death investigator, Jacksonville State scholar. Let's talk about this photo that we have up on the wall right here, right now. Victor, what's the story behind this photo?
Well, this is a photo I'm sure most people have never seen. This is a photograph from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation from the first autopsy, the autopsy in which they determined that Kendrick Johnson's death was the result of positional asphyxia, this accident. If you look at his ring finger here on his left hand, you see cuts there by his nails.
Yeah, I see those cuts
circle
right
them
there.
You see these cuts. This goes in line with the family's theory that there was a fight. Now, they are noted in the original autopsy, but they're not part of the narrative that was written by the state, by the local investigators, of how these cuts got on his fingers there. So the family believes that he was fighting before he ended up in that mat. Of course, they don't believe he went in by his own decision to go into the mat to grab a shoe 6 feet down, and he's 5'10". They believe that he was rolled in that mat as part of a cover-up.
All right, Joseph, you're looking at the hand here, and I'll put it under your control. What do you see of significance, and what, if anything, does this hand tell you?
Well, let's first go back to these tiny little lacerated areas that we have right here and right here. This is indicative of something that is fresh. These are not healing insults or injuries that he has. These little areas right here
so that'd be close to time of death?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding very interesting that these are what we refer to as curvilinear. These could be consistent with fingernail marks. Now, another thing that's quite interesting that people look at and have been talking about are, if we take a look at his nail beds, he has cyanotic nail beds. They're kind of a purple to blue color. This is indicative of an individual that has been deprived of oxygen in some way, which may fit back with the positional asphyxia that was initially ruled. But the idea is, was he still breathing when he was down in there? And the question, and I would submit to you, yeah, I think he probably was. But how did he get into this small space? Was he placed in there by somebody, which makes this doubly horrific?
And the question always mathematically has been, the hole at the top is 14.5 inches wide. His shoulders are 19 inches. If you get stuck at the bottom, you get stuck at the top. How did a man, or a teenager then, who's 19 inches wide at the shoulders, get through a hole that's 14.5 inches wide?
And the story is, from investigators, all the mats are upright, right? All the mats are upright. He's climbing into the mats to get his sneakers, allegedly, and then somehow gets caught in there, and then there's a whole bunch of mats surrounding it. Eventually, the mats are tilted over because they were trying to save him once someone realized that Kendrick was inside there. Joseph Scott, here's the question I have for you. Let's get back, though, to these marks. Is there any way, under any scenario, that you could see those scratches, those marks, coming as, say, the story that he climbs into the mat voluntarily and gets stuck in there? How, if you're inside a rubber gym mat, could you get those cuts?
I don't see how you could get these cuts if you're stuck in there by yourself, because these things, if you're talking about a defensive posture, this could be consistent with someone that's trying to defend themselves. If you're talking about someone trying to claw their way out, no. The injuries would be on the tips of the fingers, nails would be broken away, this sort of thing. This is consistent with some kind of insult that he's received potentially prior to him going into the mat.
Okay. We got a lot more, and this story is just starting to heat up now with the subpoenas, so we're going to continue to follow this on the case, obviously.
What do you want?
Justice for KJ!
When you want it?
Now!
After months of rallies, marches, and sit-ins, and the announcement of a federal investigation into the death of Kendrick Johnson,
I will follow the facts wherever they lead.
CNN has learned FBI agents are now conducting interviews in South Georgia. Kendrick's parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, recently sat with investigators for nearly 3 hours. The Johnsons want to know what happened to their son. It's a question Jacqueline Johnson first asked 1 year ago.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I'm calling. My son didn't come home from school today, and he still haven't got here.
Okay, what's your son's name?
Kendrick Johnson.
That was January 10th, 2013. That afternoon, the 17-year-old ran into the old gym at Lowndes High School. The following day, Kendrick Johnson was found dead, upside down in a rolled gym mat. The Johnsons never believed he died accidentally after getting stuck while reaching for this shoe, as Lowndes County investigators determined.
They know something happened in that gym, and they don't want it to come out.
The Johnsons exhumed Kendrick's body and hired an independent pathologist who determined Kendrick died from blunt force trauma to the neck, not an accident. Lowndes County Lieutenant Stride Jones spoke with CNN in May, the day after the sheriff's office closed its case.
It was not a rash decision that was leapt to by any means. I mean, we've drawn this out, done a thorough investigation, and we think we've covered all bases.
As the FBI conducts its interviews, CNN is taking an in-depth look at the accounts of the first interviews in the Kendrick Johnson case, conducted by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office.
And we've interviewed slightly over 100 and something people during this investigation. That included students, teachers, some parents that had access during the time period of question there.
We examined every incident report included in the 522-page investigative file. According to the file, Lowndes County investigators interviewed 111 people, including 7 school employees, 3 medical responders, and more than 90 students.
It started on January 11th when Kendrick Johnson was found at Lowndes High School.
The file reveals sheriff's investigators interviewed 18 people the day Kendrick Johnson was found. We took that information to HLN analyst, a former police officer and member of the FBI response team, Mike Brooks.
I want to interview someone that day, that night, or maybe the following day while things are still fresh in your mind.
However, the documents reveal most interviews occurred months later. Here's the breakdown. Investigators interviewed 33 people in the month of January, just 4 in February, 1 in March, and 72 of the 111 interviews were conducted in April, 1 more in May.
But months later, you start to leave out possibly some crucial pieces of information, because it's your mind. Sometimes you can recall things that you might not have recalled that particular day, but to a couple days, maybe even a week after it happened, I say week on the outside, but not months, Victor, not months.
Remember, Kendrick's body was found January 11th. The first emergency medical technicians called to the scene initially for a reported cardiac arrest were interviewed April 17th. The paramedic who noticed bruising to Kendrick's jaw and considered the gym to be a crime scene was interviewed April 18th. The janitors who cleaned the gym where the body was found yards from these blood streaks on a wall were among the last to be interviewed on April 26th. Local investigators believe the blood is unrelated. However, they've never found whose blood it was or how it got there. And according to their report, the investigators did not ask the janitors about that blood. And look again at the school surveillance video. This was the last time Kendrick Johnson was seen alive. There were other students in the gym, but the investigators' reports have no record of interviews with any of these students.
I looked at the crime scene investigation, evidence collection, the autopsy, the interviews that were done and were not done in a timely fashion. This is a sloppy case from the get-go.
After the U.S. attorney announced the federal investigation, the attorney for the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office wrote to CNN in part, "While Sheriff Prine has every confidence that his officer's investigation was handled with the necessary diligence to assure that all leads were examined and exhausted, he welcomes the U.S. attorney's further review of the case."
What do you want? Justice!
The Johnsons and their supporters now hope the FBI will get an answer to their question. What happened to Kendrick Johnson?
That's my child, and we're going to fight till it's all over, until we get the truth. That's all we've ever asked for, was the truth about what happened to Kendrick Johnson.
Pathologists concluded that the teen died as a result of unexplained, apparent, non-accidental blunt force trauma. blunt force trauma. Blunt force trauma, blunt force trauma, blunt force trauma. They also discovered that Kendrick Johnson had died from a blow to the right side of his neck that was consistent with inflicted injury. The pathologist concluded that the teen died as a result of unexplained, apparent, non-accidental blunt force trauma.
Greetings world, we are Anonymous. On the evening of January 10, 2013, 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, a sophomore at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, was reported missing by his mother Jackie, a bus driver for Lowndes County Schools. He had went to school that morning, but did not return home, so his mother called 911. The following day KJ's body was discovered inside of a gym mat in Lowndes High School's old gym. The superintendent West Taylor's two daughters were the first to discover KJ's body by seeing a pair of feet with white socks sticking out of the vertical rolled gym mat. These students notified teachers and they moved the gym mat to the floor, exposing KJ's body still in the gym mat. Local authorities were called, as well as the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Both law enforcement agencies were on the scene for hours before the coroner was called, which is a violation of Georgia law. Paramedics that arrived on scene said the scene should be considered a crime scene. They were aware that the scene they were at was that of a homicide. The paramedics noticed bruising on KJ's body, including bruises to his neck and face. The law enforcement agencies did not secure the area with crime scene tape as they already had a theory in place as to what happened. Their official story is that KJ, whose shoulders measured 19 inches wide, dove headfirst into a 6-foot-long rolled-up gym mat, with a hole of 14 inches wide, to obtain a shoe. He had gotten stuck in the mat, and being upside down for that long, he died. There was a pool of blood under the gym mat, but none on the shoe that he had dived in the mat to retrieve. KJ's shoes that he was wearing when he was last seen on the surveillance cameras were tossed into the mat near his feet that were in the air. There were also another pair of gym shoes and a hoodie near the gym mat. Those were not collected as evidence. There was also blood on a vertical beam located near the mat, and the trash can in one of the bathrooms of the old gym was filled with bloody paper towels. These were quickly dismissed by saying a female had gotten injured in the old gym the night before, as KJ's dead body was laying in the mat. The blood was only tested to see if it matched KJ's, and it did not. When asked about the evidence that was not collected, Sheriff Chris Prime became angry and said this.
Got some questions about the Kendrick Johnson case.
I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Why not, sir?
Because our case is closed.
The family has some concerns about why some things were not taken into evidence. There was blood on the wall.
I'm not going to discuss the case with you.
And why is that?
Because I don't want to.
Then, less than a minute after he'd invited us in,
What did you not understand that I said? I'm through talking to you.
The coroner was not notified for 6 hours. Sheriff Prine excused this as not wanting the coroner to have to wait on investigators to sweep the scene. There are reports that the investigators wore gloves during the investigation, but they failed to wear foot protection. The foot protection is not to actually protect the shoes from anything, but to protect the scene from any foreign contaminants. Several students at Lowndes High School said they saw KJ's body be taken out of the gym immediately after discovery. The students who were interviewed about the discovery share a very similar explanation. They said students often played on top of the mats. On the evening of January 11th, Sheriff Prine was telling media it was an accident. Some information on positional asphyxia from Wikipedia.com was included in the sheriff's report. The coroner, after being pursued by Victor Blackwell from CNN, later admitted that the scene had been compromised and the report he wrote was changed by Lowndes County Sheriff. He provided his original report, and Lowndes County Sheriff's Office had removed many things from it. KJ's mother was at the office in the school that day checking to see if her son had come to school. He had been marked absent. During her time in the office, KJ's body was discovered and the school went on lockdown. Students of the school informed KJ's mother that it was her son that was found. She tried to go to the gym to identify the body, but law enforcement refused to allow her to see it. The next day KJ's father, who was out of town for work, returned to town and tried to identify the body, but was denied access. The LSCO took KJ's body to the Valdosta Lowndes Regional Crime Lab. This lab does not have any affiliation with the GBI or the Office of the Coroner, but is directly connected to the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office and Valdosta City Police Department. Sheriff Prine was adamant in stating that officers in his office were not involved in compromising the death scene or the body is false. It was officers directly connected to LSCO that had access to the body after it was discovered. The gym mat shoe theory doesn't work. There is no way a teenager would dive headfirst into a mat propped up in the corner of the gym to get a shoe, while holding his headphones in his hand. If alone, it is impossible that his sneakers would end up on top of him. KJ's shoes were most likely taken off of him so his killers could more easily fit his body into the mat while rolling it up. From the very start, KJ's family never believed the story of the mat. It was only the second day back after Christmas break that KJ was killed. Lowndes High School was supposed to hand over all surveillance video the morning KJ's body was discovered. The IT tech said there was a problem and supposedly handed over video days later. KJ's family had to sue the school in court to get access to it. CNN also gained access to it and called experts in to evaluate. These experts said there was hours missing from the cameras right outside the gym. With all the discrepancies of evidence, testimonies, and witnesses, we call bullshit on the official story. So has the federal prosecutor who opened an investigation in October 2013. Karen Bell, wife of FBI agent Rick Bell and mother of Brandon and Brian Bell, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that her sons and FBI agent husband are the targets of the federal investigation. Brian and KJ had fought before and the Johnson family are suing Lowndes County School District for not protecting KJ from being bullied by the Bell brothers on campus. Brian is a star linebacker on the football team and is committed to playing for FSU football next year under coach Jimbo Fisher. In fact, Jimbo Fisher was visiting Lowndes High School and pulled Brian Bell out of class the morning that KJ's body was discovered in the old gym. In interviews, Karen Bell says her son is the victim and is afraid for his safety. There are only 2 students who refused to be interviewed by investigators, Brandon and Brian Bell. However, Brian and his mother Karen have been interviewed by Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Karen has given several interviews to Adam Floyd of the Valdosta Daily Times. Adam Floyd is the main writer assigned to the Kendrick Johnson case for the Valdosta Daily Times and is the creator of the Kendrick's Last Walk video on YouTube, as well as providing a timeline for KJ's disappearance. You should know that Adam Floyd was a teacher at Lowndes High School when KJ was killed. He left his teaching job to be employed full-time at the Valdosta Daily Times. Brandon Bell told a reporter on Twitter that the wrestling team was in Macon, Georgia on January 9th, 10th and 11th. The information first given by Lowndes High School was that the wrestling team left early on the morning of January 10th. Now, thanks to evidence found through the Johnson family lawyers, Lowndes High School has admitted that the wrestling team did not leave LHS until 12:30 on January 10th. This leaves a block of time in which KJ, Brandon, and Brian Bell all had lunch. The narrative provided by Lowndes County Sheriff's Office said that KJ went missing during 4th block. However, thanks to an interview with Lee Touchton, lead investigator of the SCLC, we know KJ went missing during 3rd block, where he shared a lunch period with both Bell brothers. Recently released surveillance video by the Johnson family lawyers shows Brandon Bell crossing the hallway back and forth by the old gym. At one point he completely changes his clothing. There is a cover-up of mass proportions in Valdosta, Georgia. There is no way that the official story could be the truth. KJ was found beaten and bloody, stuffed inside of a mat that he could have gotten out of. The collection of evidence was mishandled purposely to help cover up the crime. The surveillance was edited with hours deleted. The only DNA tested the blood on wall to match KJ's and it didn't match. What really happened to Kendrick Johnson that day? Who killed that boy before he could begin exploring life after high school? Why did the authorities not do a full and complete investigation into the death of this teen? With every piece of new evidence that is revealed, there are more questions raised than answers given. Some black students were told they were not allowed to be interviewed by law enforcement. Administration at Lowndes High School told students if they talked, their graduation would be threatened. The people of Valdosta know a cover-up has taken place and that local law enforcement will harass and arrest them for providing false statements. The people are afraid of the backlash if they come forward. The time has come for those people to join the fight for justice. Expose the corrupt for who they are. Expose the racism that is alive and well in Valdosta. The time has come to stand against the oppressors and fight for the truth.